Welcome to this live conversation with Japanese master craftsman Hosai Matsubayashi XVI. He's a 16th generation head potter of Asahiyaki in Uji, Kyoto. My name is Gianfranco Chicco. I'm an experienced designer and curator of the Craftsman newsletter and the head of content and digital at the London Design Festival. I will be your co-host for today, together with Tomo Yoshisawa, a Japan-based cultural translator and crafts expert. Uji, the town of Uji, has long been an established brand name for green tea, and Asahiyaki is located by the Uji River on the foot of Mount Asahi. The kiln was founded under the instruction of the famous tea master, feudal lord and also polymath Kobori Enshū about 400 years ago. Following the tradition of aesthetics established by Enshū, which was an evolution of wabi-sabi, called kirei, which is usually translated as elegant or withered simplistic beauty, Asahiyaki has been producing functional utensils such as tea strainers and teacups for everyday use, as well as tea bowls, water containers, and other objects for the chado, the path of tea, or usually called in English the tea ceremony. In a previous session of this series, Essence of the Shokunin, we were with Shuji Nakagawa at the Kyoto Museum of Crafts and Design, where we got to see works from Asahiyaki, including several by Hosai Matsubayashi, spanning 180 years. Today, instead, we're invited into the Asahiyaki workshop to take a look at Hosai's creative process. We'll also dive into the thoughts and techniques behind it and what it's like to carry on with a tradition that's been running for over 400 centuries. The conversation will be both in English and Japanese. So now let me pass the word on to you, Tomo-chan in Uji.
Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you for the beautiful music intro which calmed my soul. Today we are really lucky to have been invited to inside this Asahiyaki kiln studio by this special guest, 16th generation of the kiln, Hosai Matsubayashi. こんばんは、皆さん、文化の翻訳家の吉澤智と申します。本日はですね、京都の宇治にございます、Asahiyakiさんの工房に招いていただきました。こちらにいらっしゃいます16世、松林豊斎さんをゲストにお送りいたします、エッセンスの職人です。松林さん、どうぞよろしくお願いします。
よろしくお願いします。Good morning。そして、こんばんは。よろしくお願いいたします。
True, I said good evening, but it's good morning right there, Jan.
Well, actually, we have people joining from all over the place. We have people, yes, in the United Kingdom, where I'm based, but I've also seen people from Japan. We've seen people from Amsterdam. I see people joining in from Germany, Italy. So a bit all over the place. Luxembourg, Australia. So hello, Australia. So it's really a great international meeting of minds.
Great. So I wasn't wrong. I thought we could start up from just having him explain a little bit about the work of Asahiyaki, displaying some of the works he has done. Should we do that?
Yes, please.
ちょっと簡単にAsahiyakiについてこちらに並んでいる作品を手に取りながらお話しいただけますでしょうか。
はい。まず、今、ジャンさんご説明いただいたように、Asahiyakiっていうのは400年の歴史があって、お茶の器を作ってきました。
So, you've already done quite a bit of explanation already, but Asahiyaki is it's about the tea bowls. They've been making tea utensils for over 400 years.
この抹茶のための、茶碗、特にAsahiyakiの場合は、鹿の背中のような斑点模様ということで、枷というスタイルが、トラディショナルなスタイルとして載っています。
And this is what we call as chawan matcha tea bowl, especially made for green tea matcha ceremonies. And you can see this is their Asahiyaki's signature patterns called foam back. You can see this cute dots like you see on a Bambi's back, and that's their signature glaze. Can you see it well from camera? Tell me. Yeah, you can see it. Okay, so this is the more traditional aesthetic of Asahiyaki.
Asahiyaki っていうのはこの表情を出すために自分たちで土を掘って、それを数十年寝かした後に使うというのが非常に大事なポイントになっています。
And what they do is they actually dig out the clay that's perfect for making this bowl, and they let it rest for over decades in order to make these bowls afterwards. So they have to let it rest for a while.
まあ同じ土でも宇治の土でも少し鉄分が多くなるとこういうような少し赤い表情を出してくれます。
As you can see, this is also their signature hornback, bambusback pattern, but this has more like a reddish shade because it contains more iron inside.
まあこういう同じ茶碗でも今のようなトラディショナルなものとまた同じ綺麗サビという美意識を持ちながら今私16世としてはこういう月白釉という新しいスタイルのものを作っています。
And this is the new aesthetic that he's been trying to develop for over his time. This is called Geppaku. Literal translation would be moon white glaze. You can see this beautiful pale blue glaze on top of the tea bowl.
もう一つ、より実用的な日常の意味でのお茶の器ということで、まあ、こういう、急須、日本語で言うと急須ですし、まあ、宝品という言い方もありますけれども、宇治のお茶を一番美味しく飲むための、まあ、リーフのお茶のための器を作っています。
And aside from this more ceremonial tea bowl, they also make this more functional daily use objects such as this is called Hohin, which is tea strainer. It's perfectly made to enjoy the Uji tea, which Uji is also famous for green tea. So this is made especially to enjoy Uji tea at its best.
まあ、抹茶のためのよりこうティーセレモニー非日常的なお茶の器と、日常のお茶の器とその両方の軸を持ちながら、それでいてやはりお茶というものを一つ、中心に持ちながら作ってきた窯元ですね。
So this is more ceremonial side of tea, and these are the more daily object utensils, functional object. But either way, these two pillars are both have this common factor, which is tea, and that's the other basic main work.
そこで実はイギリスともすごく縁のある窯でして、一つこう紹介したいものがあるんですけれども、見えますか？
Yes, and I think there are many audience tuning in from England as well, and this is representing their long established connection with England or UK.
実はこれ2015年にセントアイブスという場所で作った茶碗なんですけれども、2種類の土、宇治の土と、イギリスのコーンウォールの土と使って作っています。
So this was made in 2015 by Hosai himself using two clays, white one which is he brought from Uji, and this brownish shade he used the one from Cornwall, and he mixed it as a sort of representation of bridging east and west.
これを作ったのは実は100年前、ちょうど100年前に僕から言うとひいおじいちゃんの弟松林鶴之助という人物が、セントアイブスに行ってバーナード・リーチという陶芸家のために、そこで作陶をして窯を作ったということがあった、まあ、その縁から2015年にイギリスに行きました。
So this work is almost like an homage to 100 years ago. His great-grandfather's brother who went to St. Ives to build a kiln in St. Ives, which is famous, capital of pottery in England. And so his great-grandfather's brother went over there and built a kiln with Bernard Leach. And this is sort of commemorating the connection of England and Japan.
And I think this is an important point, right, for all the fans of studio pottery in particular, because of course the Leach pottery is today world famous, but Hosai's great grandfather's brother was invited to help them rebuild the kiln both for Hamada and Leach. So I love that in many of these sessions we've also been looking into the connections between what are often seen as different worlds in the West and the East.
やっぱりイギリスで、世界的に有名なリーチ工房ですけれども、その窯の再建にあたってそのひいおじい様のお父さんでいらっしゃる之助さんがリーチと浜田を助けたっていうのはすごく興味深いポイントですよね。
そうですね。やっぱりこう100年前にそういう縁があって、でそれがまあ今もこういろんな意味でつながってるというところに、まあこう工芸っていうものの時間軸の長さをすごく感じるなと思います。
And this is just a great reminder for us how handcrafts world itself has such a long span of the time. You know, we're just talking about easily about something that happened in 100 years ago, which still has connection to our present day. It's very symbolic of crafts world.
Before we jump into, oh, sorry, yes.
One more thing.
そうで今もロンドンの、皆さんよく知ってますけどポスターチーズの、とすごく、まあ、つながりを持ってロンドンと一緒にこう今の茶の器を作らせていただいているということもすごく自分にとっては大きなことかなと思います。
So this is probably the representation of the present connection with Uji and London. This is the collaboration made with him with the postcard teas based in London. And this is just his thanks to their friendship with London.
And it's interesting because often in the West, or at least outside of Japan, China, and Korea, we see tea as a drink and we refer to it as a drink. But of course, the context in which Asahiyaki was founded 400 years ago is broader than just tea. There's even a connection with Zen and certain practices and rituals where tea and the vessels created for that were almost the enablers for those things to happen. So could you talk a bit about what was the context of tea and Zen or religion or just beyond the beverage when Asahiyaki started?
朝日焼きに関して400年前に遡れるということで、私たち普段ですね、今お茶を飲むって簡単にペットボトルからも飲めるような時代ですけれども、当時はお茶っていうのはもう少し特別なものであったんですよね。もちろん禅であったりとか、そういったものとの関わりっていうのもあるんですけれども、その400年前に朝日焼きが始まった時のそういった歴史的な背景ですが、少し禅とのつながりっていうようなことでもお話しいただけますか？
一つは400年前に日本で茶の湯という文化と禅という文化が共にすごくこう注目されたというか花開いた時代である。でそこで、禅というものをベースにしながら自分たちの美意識というものをどう表現していくか、そういうことの中で朝日焼きは小堀演習の美意識を表現する器として出来上がっていったという歴史です。
So 400 years ago, it's the time when both the culture of Zen and tea both flourished in Japan. And it was the time you already mentioned about the feudal law, also tea connoisseur Kobori Enshū, who was a Zen master. And so that was the time when they started bringing in the culture of tea based on the Zen aesthetic. And Kobori Enshū helped create Asahiyaki aesthetic based on that culture.
That's fascinating. I know we have some tea aficionados, some pottery aficionados, and some potters in today's conversation. So I guess it'll be probably the right time to have a deeper look into the workshop and the work per se.
今回それぞれお茶の世界のファンの方も陶芸の世界のファンの方もいらっしゃるので、そろそろちょっと工芸の工房の中を実際に、見せていただいても。Okay, then so I will switch myself to cameraman if you could handle the monitor.
せっかくなので作るところ、まず我々今これがその土そのものですね。宇治の土、自分たちで山の中から掘って、それを50年以上寝かした後生成した土がこれです。
So the clay we have in front of us is been rested for 50 years. His ancestors dug this clay out from the mountain and let it rest for 50 years.
必ず、土をこねると、あるいは揉むというふうに言うんですけれども、硬さを均一にするために揉み。
So we call it either pounding or kneading the clay in order to sort of equalize the texture.
その後こう空気を土の中から外へ押し出すために 菊もみっていう揉み方をするんですけれども、こういうここがまあ花のように
Okay.
見える
So
という
this
こ
is
と
a
です。
special technique called chrysanthemum kneading. You can see it looks a bit like chrysanthemum, right? Like these petals. And this is done in order to air out the clay.
Yeah, in English, it's called spiral wedging, right? But there's a fun factoid that the expression you use in Japanese for kneading the clay, it's something like killing the clay, so something like that.
Let me ask. なんか土を殺すみたいな表現ってあります？なんかその
土をよくご存知で、土を殺すっていうのは、まあ、ここの部分も土を殺すっていうふうに言うこともあるんですけれども、この後お風呂に据えた後、土殺しという僕たちの言葉で工程があります。
You know so much, Jan. Okay, you are right. This could be called that, but you get to see the real killing of the clay later on. We get to show you. So this is his special spot of his own potter's wheel.
So
you are going to see him kill the clay right now.
土を上に上げたり下ろしたりすることによって、
You can see clay moving up and down.
何をしているかと言いますと、土のコンディションを整えてるんですけれども、そのこうろくろが回っていくのに土の粒子がそれぞれこう方向性みたいなのがあって、それがこう土の回転とうまく向きが揃っていってくれると、土が自由自在に動いていってくれるんですけれども、最初の段階だと土の中でこういろんな粒子があちこち向いてるので、それを整えています。
Okay, as you can see, I guess he would call it stabilizing the condition of the clay. You see these small grains inside the clay. Is at first they're not, they're in facing the same direction as we say, but by repeating this process, the grain will be somewhat pasteurized. I don't know how to put it, but they will be more suitable for creating the shape that he wants to make.
This looks so simple, but as someone who has tried to center clay on a wheel and struggles, continuously and can practically never do it, it's mesmerizing to see not only that he can, do it as a demo, but also that he can speak while he's doing it.
これね、すごく簡単なプロセスに見えますけど、このろくろの真ん中にこうやって土を安定させてするって誰もができることではなくて、松林さん今話しながらそれをやってらっしゃるのがすごいですってジャンさんがおっしゃってます。
意外と難しくて、多分皆さんもテレビとかでご覧になったことがあるかもしれないですけど、ちょっとこう触るとこういうふうにこう軸がブレてしまうので、必ずその土のなんていうんですかね、方向性みたいなものをこう手で感じながら、頭で考えるというよりはもう手で感じながら動かしていくことによって土が言うことを聞いてくれる状態になる。
Okay, so I'm going to literally translate how he said it, and because it's interesting. So there is a direction, the grain of the clay that's facing, and he's trying to kind of stabilize the direction of the clay while trying to listen to the clay with his hands rather than thinking in the head.
で、コンディションが整ってきたところで器を作る作業に入っています。
And when he feels the clay is ready to be made, he'll start creating the shape.
A person was asking if the skill of pottery in Japan is still passed down within families, and if young people are interested in continuing with this, craft or art form?
日本の陶芸っていうのは今でも家族で継承されているものでしょうか？
いろんなパターンがあるんですけれども、やはり家族で継承されているということは非常にポピュラーかなと思います。
There are many cases, different cases, different variations, but I guess still pottery being a family-run business is the most common.
And is there a current strong interest in it? For example, in the UK, from my experience, especially during lockdown, pottery became very, very popular. Courses were sold out everywhere. So I wonder what's the current relationship of younger people or people in general with learning the craft in Japan today.
イギリスではコロナ期間中に陶芸への興味がすごく高まった傾向があるそうで、松林さんは今日本の、一般若者ですとか陶芸への興味っていう、あとは陶芸教室に通いたい人とか、何か印象実感として増えているっていうのはありますか？
そうでしょうね。日本の場合はやっぱりちょっと今逆に言うとその外に出て人通うみたいなことが避けられてるかなという気はするので、僕たちは実感としては特に若い世代じゃない人たちは陶芸教室今まで通ってたけれどもちょっとしばらくお休みしようかなみたいな方もいらっしゃったりしますね。
確かに。Well, maybe on the contrary, Japan, because we always had a steady population of people wanting to learn pottery as a hobby, but then during the corona lockdown, many people avoid contact, so they stopped going to the classes to avoid human contact. So maybe in Japan, the situation is on the contrary. From my point of view, I think there's always a steady interest in making pottery. Also, these objects, plates, tea bowls, daily tableware are very much part of Japanese life, and I think it's maybe a lot closer in terms of Japanese table, everyday life.
Interesting. And someone was asking about the clay. Is it refined in any way, or is it dug straight from the mountain, stored, and then used? Is there any treatment to the clay?
先ほど山から土を掘ってきて寝かせるっておっしゃってましたけど、その中でやはり精錬される過程っていうのはあるわけですか？
そうですね。まずは60年、50年以上寝かすというふうに言いましたけど、その間は山で野ざらしにして、いわゆる風化をさせていくんですけれども、それが終わると山から工房へ持ってきて、土をふるいにかけて、ドロドロにして、そして、石とか砂、木を取り除いて、もう一度ギュッと絞る。その作業のことを精錬するというふうに言うんですけど、生成するというんですけども、その作業をして、今、使える状態に。
Yes, there is a refining process. When he said they leave clay for 50 years, they just leave them in the mountain as they are. And when they are ready to be used, they will bring the clay down to the studio and get rid of some particles that are not necessary, stones, and just refining process starts from there.
Thank you.
なんていうかな、指の跡なんですね、このラインというのが。
Can you see this stripe line that he used the fingers to create this shape?
Yes.
この土の柔らかさといかにそれを生かす、柔らかさを生かして自分で感じながら伸ばせるかによってこのラインというものの美しさが決まってくるので、我々はそこを大事にして、
These lines, the traces of his finger represents the aesthetic. So he has to feel into the clay, how soft, how malleable it is to create this shape and the lines.
So let's center on this for a moment. We often talk about thinking, of course, with our brain or through language, which you could classify as intellectual thinking. But then there's other kinds of thinking. There's, of course, what we call tacit knowledge, thinking with your hands. So I'm interested in he uses the word feeling, right? When the clay is right, when the shape is right. So could you talk more about the kind of thinking you're doing when you're making?
やっぱりその考えるっていうことを私たち現代人は頭で考えがちなんですけれども、職人展でも皆さんが探られていた暗黙知とかそういったものを探られる過程で、今松林さんはやはり手で作りながら考えていらっしゃるのではないかと思うんですけれども、例えばどうやって手で感じながらこれが正解だとかこの形だっていうところまでたどり着くかっていうプロセスをもう少し詳しく話していただけますか？
まずはやっぱり感じることがすごく大事で、作ってる最中に考えてることって実はすごく少ないんですよね。で、今一個作り終わりましたと。で、その時に何か違うなと感じれば、もう一度やり直さなくちゃいけない。で、いい形ができたっていう時の感触、感覚というものをいかに手に残すかということが我々にとっては一番大事なことになります。
So there's not much of thinking while he's making this. It's more of feeling, and it's about remembering the sensation of your hands and the fingers when he actually created something that's complete, and trying to just reach that feeling that he gets every time. It's just all about the feeling and trying to get the same feeling with every object he's creating.
And how was the learning or the transmission of knowledge from, for example, his father or his grandfather to him? What was the learning process, the training? Was it more about the making and getting things, trying to get things right based on a model, or was it also direct instruction via maybe words?
おじいさんやお父さんから教えてもらうときに、これが正解だぞっていう形とか、そこにたどり着くまでのプロセスってどういうふうに教えてもらいました？
一つは、これは職人としては多分みんな通る道なんですけど、何が正解、なぜそれが正解か、なぜ間違ってるかっていうことはあんまり教えてもらえなくて、例えばざーっと並んでくるじゃないですか。これあかんなって言われるんですよね。で、あかんって言われたやつを、じゃあなんであかんやろうっていうことを、何が自分が思ってることとあかんって言われたことの差にあるのかっていうことを、考えて、で、いいって言われたものとあかんって言われたものの自分の感覚の差みたいなものを考えてるうちに、これがいい感覚なんやっていうのが見えてくる。
So it's interesting. So you see all this line of works that he creates, and after he's made a bunch of works, his father or grandfather would come up, and they would never tell you what's right when you've done right. They'll only tell you this is not good. So they only tell you when you made something not right. So what you have to do is pick out what's been done right and what's not right, and try to remember the feeling when you created what's right, and trying to recreate that more often rather than the one that wasn't good.
面白い。Another thing that I'm interested in is, he started, of course, under his predecessor's wing, and a few years ago he became the head of Asahiyaki. So there's an interesting duality here. On one side now he represents a 400-year-old tradition, but also he's looking into creating new styles or having his own view of it, both as a craftsman, as an artist. So I'm curious, what was the transformation between being the individual, within the family to becoming the head of the pottery? Were there any changes there? Was there any evolution or even challenge to move from one phase to the next one?
松林さんが、お父様の代を継いで襲名されたのが、7年前になります。
2016年ですね。
16年。わかりました。そうするとそれで、その襲名っていうことがすごく興味深いんですけれども、それまでは、一人の一個人だった人から朝日焼きの代表になったっていうことに関する挑戦 ですとか、また一人の朝日焼きの職人としてものづくりをするっていうことと、一人のアーティストとして新しい美意識を作っていくことのその2つの間での、ご自身の在り方とか、そういったことについてお話しいただけますでしょうか。
そうですね。まずその襲名をしたことによって自分ですごく考えるようになったのは、朝日焼きらしいということはどういうことなんだろうかっていうことを、今までよりも強く考えるようになりました。一方でその朝日焼きらしさみたいなものを持ちながら、でも朝日焼きの当主っていうのは自分の前に15人いるわけで、その同じことをやってては意味がなくて、この今という時代において、作るべき朝日焼きらしさっていうものが何なのかっていうことを考えるようになりました。
After succession of his father's name, after he took over his father's name, he started more seriously about what is Asahiyaki, what represents Asahiyaki, what is like Asahiyaki, and having to find the identity in it. But at the same time, there has been 15 heads of Asahiyaki in the past, and he can't be just following the step. He has to be the head of the kiln on this present day, and he has to think about what he can offer in his own angle to present day Japan.
その時に思ったのは、それまで自分が持ってた朝日焼きらしさっていうものよりも、実はすごく深いところ、表面的なところではなくて、深い部分に朝日焼きらしさの根本っていうのがあって、その根本みたいなものを見つめていくと、表面、例えば色であったり、形であったりというのは、朝焼きにとって根本的なことではないんじゃないだろうかというふうになってきたときに、先ほど見ていただいたような新しい、潔白油の色であったり、形みたいなものが自分の中で生まれてきて、かつそれが朝日焼きらしいって言えるような、なんかそういう自信みたいなものが出てきました。
So after thinking about what represents Asahiyaki, he came to this idea that it is actually not the surface level, something we can see. It's not in the color, it's not the shape of the object. It's actually much deeper. It's the essence of Asahiyaki that represents what is Asahiyaki. And through that, he came to see, which helped him develop the moon white glaze that we saw earlier on. And this is very different to the traditional aesthetic, but now he can, after explored what is Asahiyaki, he can confidently say, this is Asahiyaki too. Jan, would you like us to take a tour?
Yes, let's go and check out the kiln. But I wanted to ask you a question about the last bowl with the Geppaku. Someone was asking if that bowl in particular is thrown and then cut, or if it's handmade.
こちらの特に一つの月白油なんですけれども、これはろくろ引きをされた後に表面を削られているんですかという質問がありました。
もういくつかですね。こういう器を見たときに、例えば楽という茶碗を知っている方もいらっしゃるかなと思うんですけども、楽の茶碗っていうのはろくろを使わずに形を作って中も外も削り出していく茶碗なんですけども、我々はろくろっていうのを非常に大事にしている窯元なので、ろくろで引いた後に外だけを削っていきます。
Exactly as our guest suggested, so this has been thrown on a potter's wheel and then shaped outside. And some of you may have been reminded of some raku jawan, which is completely hand-built inside and out. And they shape inside and out, create that shape. But as an Asahiyaki, they really take importance of throwing on a potter's wheel. So that's why he created on the wheel and shaped outside.
Interesting. So let's go for that tour.
Okay. じゃあちょっと工房の中をもう少し見せていただいてもよろしいでしょうか。
はい。 では、今作る工程の中で一番大事なろくろという部分を見ていただいたんですけれども、もう一つ、大きく重要なポイントとしての焼くというための窯を見ていただきたいなと思います。
Okay, so what we've just witnessed is one of the most important components of creating Asahiyaki, which is potter's wheel. Now we are going to see the firing process, which is another important component of Asahiyaki.
今、場所移ってきまして、ここが、窯、我々、上り窯というふうに呼んでる窯の、前に来ました。
So here we are in front of Asahiyaki kiln. This is ascending kiln. Maybe I'll get to show you from the side so we can see it's ascending.
Yeah, nobody gama. Yeah.
Nobody gama, yes.
いわゆる薪、ウッドファイアリングの窯なんですけれども、多分見ていただいている皆さんは少しびっくりされるかもしれないのは、こういうちょっとデコレーションが、神社のようなデコレーションをしているというところが一つ特徴かなと思います。
So this is a wood-fired kiln, and some of the viewers may be surprised to see some of that mini shrine on top of the kiln.
というのも我々にとってその窯を焼くということ、そして窯そのものというのが非常に神聖なものであり、その焼くという行為を通して初めて焼き物が出来上がっていくので、常に我々はその窯に対して、リスペクトを持ちながら謙虚な気持ちで、取り組んできたというところがあります。
The reason being is that for them, firing is a very sacred activity. The pottery cannot be completed without firing. So in order to pay respect, they have this mini shrine on top of the kiln.
なので、こういうふうにデコレーション、神道のようなデコレーションをしますし、窯を焚くたびに必ずここに、このように一つの火を灯して、お祈りをします。
They have firing 3 times a year, and every time they do the firing, before that they have this ritual of putting a candle on and pray to the kiln that it goes well this time.
焼くたびにこのお祈りをしたこのろうそくの火を窯の中に入れて、焼いていくという、そういう、儀式というか習慣を持ちながら焼いていく。
And for that ritual, they take the fire from the candle and put it in a kiln itself to start the fire.
そういうところが先ほど言ってた朝日焼きのじゃあその表層的な部分ではなくて根本的な大事なところってどういうところかっていうと、こういう火に向かって、お祈りをしてから炊くような、そういう作ることに対する態度みたいなものが、朝日焼きの根本にあるんじゃないかなっていうふうになってきました。
So this is one of the reasons why he realized what's really important for Asahiyaki is not on the superficial surface level. This kind of ritual, the humility and the attitude towards clay making is more essential to Asahiyaki.
And in general, for how long are the firings in the Noborigama? How long do they last?
焼成の期間ってどれぐらいになりますか
？3日間窯に火が入ってから最後炊き終わるまで。
So it goes on for 3 days straight.
And Asahiyaki also has gas kilns, right? For some of the more homewares, they also use other kind of kilns for that work.
ガス窯も使ってらっしゃいますか？
そうですね。ものに合わせて特に、日常的なもの、時期のもの、そういったものはガス窯で焼きますし、こちらの、より不確実なもの、そういったものを大事にしたいものに関しては上り窯で焼きます。
Yes, as you said, they do have gas kiln as well for more of the porcelains and daily objects. But some of the products, as he said, he would like to treasure the uncertainty of it. He would put them on this wood firing kiln.
And speaking of uncertainty, I know that it's usually not a big percentage of pots that then pass the test, right? So how much of the things that they fire in the Noborigama, then they deem are good for the market or for being sold or for representing Asahiyaki as an object.
不確実性を大事にされているとおっしゃいましたけど、じゃあ例えばこちらの釜に入れて、だいたい成功、外に出せるなって思えるものはどれぐらい出来上がります？
ものによってやっぱりもちろん違うんですけれども、僕の作品、特に抹茶茶碗に関してはだいたい10個に1個ぐらいっていうのが成功する確率なので、10個に9個は世の中に出ないものっていう感じになります。
終わってしまう。
そうですね。
So, it varies depending on the object, but when it comes to his artwork, which is matcha tea bowl, only 1 out of 10 make it to the market, and the rest of it he just throws away.
What a pity.
残念です。もったいない。
Andrew is asking, the studio, the workshop looks very, very large. So how many potters are working there? And could you estimate how many objects you produce, or what's the kind of output that Asahiyaki has on a normal year?
すごく工房が広いので、何人の方働いていらっしゃいますかと、1年に大体生産される数ってどれぐらいになるでしょうか？
僕以外に、4人今職人クラフトマンがいます。で、1年間で作る量っていうのがいろいろ合わせて変わってくるので何とも言えないんですけども、だいたい5000ピースぐらいからもう少し多いっていうのが年間で作る量かなと思います。
そうですね。以外に。
そうですね。
はい。So 4 potters aside Matsubayashi-san working in this kiln right now, and altogether they would probably produce something like 5,000 pieces a year.
Wow. Now, talking of kilns and potteries, I mean, over the last at least the last 2 centuries, there's been a big industrialization and a move to make cheaper objects faster and bigger quantities. So I wonder how, of course, Asahiyaki is alive and doing quite well, but has the scene in Japan changed? The number of independent potteries been reduced or suffered because of the trend to industrialization and cheaper products?
工業化の波っていうのは日本でも避けられない、ずっとここ20世紀ありましたけれども、そんな中でもAsahiyakiさんはこうやって生き延びてこられましたけど、陶芸界全体ではどういった傾向にあると思いますか？
視点をどこに持つかっていうので大きく変わってくるんですけれども、日本でもやっぱり第二次大戦が終わった時っていうのはかなり手工業作る人少なくなっちゃったところから、高度成長期っていうのは機械化も進みながらも、手工業自身も実は発展してきた部分があって、でもそれが大体その80年ぐらいをピークだと思うんですけれども、どんどん、減ってきてしまっているというのが現状かなとは思います。
I guess depending on which area you focus on, but even after the World War II, there is a resurge of craftsmanship. People paid more attention to craftsmanship, as well as industrialization was forging ahead. And but other than that, people wanted to buy more crafts, and there was people are involved in buying more crafts. And we headed towards the economy bubble in 70s and 80s, and there are many crafts that sold. Speaking from my point of view, it was same. My grandfather sold lots of kimono during the economic bubble. But after that, there has been, as the economy declined, there was also decline in the crafts world too. 私の祖父も着物を作っていたので、やはり80年代の経済成長の時代っていうのは本当に着物もよく売れた。
そうですよね。僕の所属している伝統的な陶芸家ばかりの会があるんですけども、父の時代が多分30人から40人近い30人ぐらいの会員数だったんですけども、今僕の世代っていうのは多分15人切ってるんですよ。なので半分ぐらいになっちゃうというのが必然的に起こります。
And one example being that his father was part of a traditional craftsmen's association, which held a membership of like about 30 craftsmen back then. But in his generation right now, there are only 50. So the membership actually been halved over the years.
Mm, mm. One of the things I find very interesting and very relevant in today's world, which, for a majority, we see the human being at the top of the system, of the natural systems, of the, of course, productivity or product systems, is that Asahiyaki's work is almost an equal parts partnership. There's the clay, the natural resource. There's, of course, the craftsperson that adds an element to it, and then there's the fire. But the work cannot happen without the three of them sharing a role. And it's not it's not that the human is commanding. The clay has an influence in the product, the fire has an influence in the product. So it's almost like a three-party partnership to create these works.
やっぱり特にこの陶芸っていう世界だと顕著だなと思うんですけれども、土っていう要素と火という要素、そして人間っていうのが、三位一体になってものを作るっていうのがありますよね。その人間の力だけでは一つのものを作り得ないっていうところがすごく実感できるところで、それがとても興味深いなと思います。
そうですね。特に我々の場合だと、例えば陶芸っていうものにどう向き合うか、土という素材にどう向き合うかっていうのが、いかにコントロールをして、火のアンコントローラブルの部分を減らしていこうという発想の人と、それは例えば電気釜で焼くということになったりするんですけれども、じゃあその自然アンコントローラブルなものをコントロールしようとはするんだけれども、そこを受け入れながら、それだからこそできる美しさっていうものを探求していく。ここ2種類に分かれてくるのかなと思うんですけれども、我々の場合は特にそのアンコントローラブルなものを受け入れながら、どうやって美しさを土の中から引き出していこうというのが朝日焼きのスタイルかなと思います。
Exactly right. But even in this pottery world, if you really try to control the clay as a material and wanted to kind of project your sense of beauty onto it, you can actually use gas or electric kiln to just like really try to manifest 100% of your vision. But that is not Asahiyaki's case. He is more interested in accepting what's beyond the control and beauty that's achieved through just letting the clay as be, through just letting. So this is sort of different way of looking at the beauty, different goal you would have as a pottery maker, and he's the one who is just going with more of the natural resource.
Well, this leads into a topic, Tomo-chan, that we've been discussing over the years, and I know is very dear to you too, which is that of self-awareness, right? Mm-hmm. The self-awareness that the craftsperson brings into this relationship, this ecosystem, this creation process. So let's dive a bit into it, and I know that you are dying to ask a couple of questions to Hosai-san, so let's go ahead with those.
Thank you for giving me the chance. Yes, there's been a question that I've been dying to ask, and it's about self-awareness as well. As some of the viewers know, that I was blessed to be part of the Shokunin exhibition, which our previous episode happened in the Kyoto Museum Crafts and Design, featuring Nakagawa-san woodworker's work as well as Matsubayashi-san's work. And during the exhibition was all about how to articulate the tacit knowledge that's been stored in your body and trying to put it in the language so they can communicate with the people outside the crafts world. And I was blessed to be part of it. And during the discussion, one question was thrown at him asking, so we are putting this knowledge into language so you can communicate to the crafts world, but isn't it more important for you to communicate this now that it's put in the words to your apprentice in your studio so you can, pass down the knowledge better? Yeah. And what was interesting was his answer to that. He got back to the director saying, when you asked me the question, I could immediately feel myself resisting and wanting to say no to your question. And I wondered why. So I made a quick self-inquiry and I came back with the answer. That is, of course, we need a language to communicate to the outside world. But in this pottery making, there's something that's being passed down through this just repetition of physical works, being with the you using your hands, thinking with your hands, that can only be passed down through that physical experience, and the words can never be enough to do that. So he would rather not to teach his apprentice with the words. That was his answer. So answer itself is interesting, but what left me with stronger impression was that his strong sense of self-awareness, he was able to catch his body resisting, and he was able to make quick self-inquiry, and they came back with the answer. And self-awareness is something really important, I guess, in the Western culture of self-development, as well as Zen temple that I go to. It's one of the first things that I was told by the Osho-sama abbot of the temple, that Zen is all about cultivating self-awareness. So my question to him, sorry about the long introduction, but I wanted to ask him, how did he manage to cultivate such strong sense of self-awareness? ちょっと長く質問になっちゃったんですけど、はい、ずっと聞きたいなと思ってたことがありまして、この前回中川さんと一緒に行った職人展ですね。これで松林さんも参加されていて、私はこういうふうにもそのプロセスに関わることができて、この中でやっぱり一つのテーマっていうのが、こうやって皆さん、松林さんも先ほど見せてくださったように、手で考えたりとか、体で分かっていることを言葉にして、なるべく手仕事の外の世界にも伝えていこうということだったと思うんですけれども、そのプロセスで松林さんに一つ質問が投げられたことがあって、こうやって言葉にしたんだから外だけじゃなくて工房のお弟子さんにもそうやって言葉で伝えなきゃいけないんじゃないですかっていう質問があったんですね。それで松林さんはそれに対してすごいお答えが印象深かったんですけれども、その質問、なるべく正確に言いますね。その質問を受けたときに、ちょっと体が、嫌だな、そうじゃないなと思っている自分を感じて、なぜかなと思って考えてみたんですけれども、言葉っていうのは、もちろん外の世界に向けては必要なんですけれども、工房の中では、やっぱりその繰り返しであったりとか、手を使ったり体を使ってすることでしか伝わらないものがずっとある。なのでやっぱり言葉で伝える、ただ教えるっていうことは避けたいんですってお答えをされたんですね。でそのお答え自体もすごい興味深かったんですけど、私にとってすごい興味深かったのは、もう松林さんが英語で言うとセルフアウェアネス、日本語だと自覚でいいのかなと思うんですけど、そのご自身の体の違和感にパッと気づいて、で自分の中を深く掘ってその答えを言葉にして持ってこれた、すごいなと思ったんですよね。その違和感に敏感でいられるっていうこと。でその西洋の世界でもやっぱりセルフアウェアネス大事って言われていますけれども、禅の世界でもお嬢様にお寺で禅は自覚の宗教ですよと言われていて、そんな中で松林さんはどうやってその自身の違和感に敏感でいって、さらにそこにちゃんと気をつけてあげて答えを探せるっていう習慣はどこで身につけられたのかな。
さっきやってたことそのものだと思うんですけども、やっぱり僕たちその職人としてものを作るときに、それが作った結果の時にこれがダメだっていうことを言われると。でそれが自分の体の中の感覚がどの感覚がダメだったのか、逆に言われなかったどの感覚はいい感覚なのかっていうことをすり込ますというか、そこによっていい悪い、これがいいもの、これが悪いもの、自分にとっていい感覚、これはダメな感覚っていうことを感じることと考えることを常に繰り返してものを作っている状況だと思うんですね。で多分今セルフアウェイネスっていうのが、注目されるっていうのは、多分そういう環境にない人が多いんだろうな、頭で考えることばっかりが先行しちゃう人たち、環境に置かれている人たちが多いんだと思うんですけども、我々みたいな職人の場合はどちらかというと感じることと考えることのこのバランスが感じることにすごくウェイトを置く環境にあるので、そういうふうになってるんじゃないかなと思います。
That's right. And we actually witnessed it earlier when he was telling us that he just, lines up his works and his father tells you this is not right. And only thing he can do is trying to remember the sensation that was left in his body when he made the right one and the wrong one, and trying to repeat the right feeling every time he creates the piece of work. And it's the only thing that kind of helped him develop his self-awareness, if you were to call it. And probably we live in this modern world, we only probably think more than feel with our body, but with him, it's the balance of thinking and feeling, this connection between his mind and the body. And it's probably more weight on the feeling into his work rather than thinking, and that probably is the why.
Just a practical information for the viewers. So Nakagawa-san, who's part of the attendees, is mentioning that the exhibition it will come to London to Japan House. So that is exciting to know. Now, I wanted to touch on one more thing, which is there's been an evolution, of course, of the context in which we use these objects, and that has changed. For example, now he's using certain glazes that react better to the kind of light we have today. Back in the day, maybe in the evening was just candles. Today we have artificial light. So I wonder, how does he follow and measure the changes to allow Asahiyaki to evolve as a tradition, but also as an output of the objects?
物を使う環境自体もずっと変化していますよね。今、私たちが物を使う環境にある明かりですとか、やっぱり100年前にこれだけの明かりの中で物を使えなかったっていうことがありますよね。その現代の環境の中で物を使うっていうことで、作るときに気をつけてらっしゃることとかはありますか？
やっぱり例えば僕が今作ってる月白油っていうものがおそらく400年前に作れたら朝日焼きっぽさはなかったと思うんですよね。で、それは400年前の茶室という空間の暗い中で見ることを前提としたときに、あの色は非常に強い色だったと思う。でも今は強い色でも僕たちはかなり心地よい、もっとブリリアントなというかビビッドな色っていうものに囲まれた生活をしているときに、あの色はすごくナチュラルさを感じさせる色合いだと思わせてくる。かつ、それが茶室の中だけではなくて、例えばホワイトキューブのような世界であったり、あるいは現代的なリビングの中で使ったとしても、それを美しいと感じる色だなって僕は思うので、あの色を用いている。そのことが、答えになるんじゃないかなと。
He's taking an example of moon white glaze that we got to see earlier on. He would think that if we placed a moon white glaze table in a tea room, which was in 400 years ago, it might have the contrast might have been too strong, too brilliant, and it wouldn't fit into the context of tea room. But nowadays, we are more used to shouty colors and strong colors in our modern life, and we can just accept the beauty as it is. And that moon white glaze might not have been very Asahiyaki-like 400 years ago, but we can accept it as it is very Asahiyaki in our modern context. And that sort of aesthetics he kind of takes into consideration when he makes his tea bowls.
Talking on aesthetics, there's one last question that has popped up, which is asking about what's the difference between wabi-sabi, which of course over the last decade or so has become, at least as an expression, very popular in the West, often applied to lots of things that have nothing to do with the essence of wabi-sabi. But what's the difference between wabi-sabi and kirei-sabi?
今わびさびっていうのは西洋でもかなり知られているようになる、時々本当わびさびでも全然ないようなこともわびさびって言われたりするんですけれども、わびさびときれいさびの違いって言ったら何でしょうって質問があったそうです。
わびさびっていうのは、多分皆さんも少しイメージがしやすくなってきてると思うんですけども、その対極にあるのはやっぱりパーフェクションというか、非常にシャイニーな超わびみたいなものがあって、それに対してそれを崩したシンプリシティな、あるいは何かちょっと欠けたような、もの、経年で変化したようなもの。これがわびだと思うんですけれども、この、対極にあるものを少しバランスさせてやる、シャイニーな部分とプリミティブな部分。それが調和したものが、綺麗さびだというふうに僕は考えています。
So his take is that when I guess we all are familiar with the term wabi-sabi, it might be easier to understand the concept by thinking of what's the opposite of wabi-sabi, which could be represented as harmonious beauty or perfection. So wabi is somewhat imperfect, deformed version of beauty, and they're just two really extreme opposite. And his take of kirei-sabi is somewhat bringing those two opposite into rather middle ground, achieving the sort of not too extreme opposite, but just let them harmoniously coexist here, and that is kirei-sabi.
Well, this has been fascinating. I'm seeing lots of thanks in the chat and in the messages. So thank you very much, Hosai-san and Tomo-chan for giving us a kind of an insider speak into Asahiyaki as a workshop, into the work per se with the demo, but also into the thoughts that go into it and how it's been evolving over the last 400 years. As usual, I would always love to spend hours and hours and hours talking about these things, but I'm sure we'll have a chance, hopefully soon, either in Uji or in London. So thank you very much both for the time and the energy and what you've shared today.
Thank you so much.
ありがとうございます。朝日の工房を見るだけでなくて、その裏側にある考え方も触れることができて、すごく反応が嬉しいです。皆さんからの感想もあって、中川さんからのロンドンに、職人展が行くことが決まったということで、うちがロンドンでジャンさんと実際に会える日が来ることを楽しみにしていますということでした。
はい、楽しみにしてます。
We look forward to seeing you over there.
はい、お疲れ様。
ありがとうございます。Thank you everyone for tuning. ありがとうございました。おやすみなさい。Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.